Hello, all, and welcome. We are back with Crisis Leadership. Today's episode focuses on a VUCA environment. If you looked it up before the episode, I appreciate the initiative. Of course, our guest today, Susan Minaya, COO, Chief Learning Strategist of Minaya Learning Global Solutions, will be joining us throughout the entire series, along with a special guest, Matt Devitt, Chief Meteorologist of WINK News. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, Susan. We are back.
Hey, Dario. Good to be back.
Good to be back. Hello to everyone else. Let's jump into it. What are we talking about today? We're looking at VUCA environments.
VUCA. Do you know where it came from?
I want to say, I think military, right?
Yeah, you knew the answer.
Yes. I have to pretend for the audience, right?
Yes, VUCA is an acronym that was initially created by the military. But since then, it's been adopted for business and just the world in general to really talk about the state of the world as we know it today. So let's break it down, shall we?
Yeah, let's break it down. Let's kick it off. First, we got the V. What are we talking about for V?
Okay, well, V is volatile.
Okay.
Right? Life is volatile. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would.
Yes. So crisis leadership will move people from the why is this happening to why we need to change, right? So here leaders need to be great at casting a vision for the future that enlists employees to take that journey and to move through the crisis. So this is really the crisis leader behaviors that you want to be seeing.
Okay, so that's volatile. Next, let's go on to the U. What's U?
Okay, the U is uncertain, right? So we live in uncertain times. So, Dario, did you ever think that you would be holed up in your house for more than a year, never being able to have contact with other people? Do you remember Singapore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Oh, yeah, we had the SARS outbreak then.
Yeah, we had SARS outbreak.
Yes, we did. We were there for that.
Yeah, do you remember how the whole town
everything kind of,
like
it was so bustling and everything kind of just shut down. Yeah, that's an old memory I didn't think about for a while.
I know. And that was like back in 2003, I think it was.
Yeah.
That was like COVID experience. It's sort of interesting because it was like a crystal ball, right? For our future. We didn't know it at the time when we were going through it when we were in Singapore, but we experienced it for sure. And the scariness of that. And it's so weird to think that 15, 17 years later, 18 years later, there we are in the same place again in our own hometown, the United States, right? So, and in certain times, though, it's really important for crisis leaders to take in what's happening, what's going on here, and get a sense of contextual understanding. You know, what's going on and what is the impact, right? Because they have to have that understanding because visualization is an important skill that they have to take to the team. You know, they have to be able to help them understand here's where we are now in a way that feels authentic and realistic to them. And we understand what's going on, and it gives them a sense of authority to kind of have that contextual understanding. But it's also helping them see how they're going to get to the desired future state. So if we can see it and break it down for people as crisis leaders, we can get there together in manageable steps. And that's what people need to know. Like if we're talking about, oh my gosh, here's the big vision, you have to be able to chunk it up so they feel like it's actually something realistic that they could do.
Okay, so we just went over the U for uncertain. All right, let's talk about the C then. What's the C?
The C is complex, right? So I don't really know what is not complex these days. I don't know about you. And as a crisis leader or any leader, really, the important capability here is transparency because transparency fosters trust. This goes back to the behaviors we discussed in the last podcast. Being calm and transparent really fosters trust in people so that they'll open up and listen to you, right? So you can kind of bring them in to help start becoming part of the solution. So the crisis leader's role is to create structure and role clarity, right? So that when everybody starts jumping in with their big ideas or here we could do this because they want to be helpful and they're starting to feel like, oh, I can do something and I'm not just a victim, right? That there's some system in place to manage all the inputs, right? So they kind of have, it's, when you look at complexity, it's everywhere, especially when you're in crisis. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved. There's even the most well-intentioned can do things that actually aren't helpful. And so the leader really needs to be kind of clear about what's needed and the way we're going to process and get things done.
Okay. All right. So finally, we are on to our final letter, The A. What is the A for?
Ambiguous.
Oh.
Yeah. But I'm not really sure what to say about that. So how does AI make you feel about your job security?
Ambiguous.
How does the world stage we're observing right now make us feel about our future as humans, about truth and justice? Who can we really believe anymore? Who is right? What's going to happen to me with all of this? Not just AI, but the world stage. It's just, there's a lot that we look around and we're not really sure how it's all going to turn out or what's going to happen. And I think AI is probably one of the greatest examples of that right now. That we have, I think, in the world, because everybody's talking about it, because it impacts everyone, and it could have a significant impact on our future, positive or negative, right? It's yet to be seen. For ambiguity, we go back to the ability to be agile, right? As a crisis leader, while being decisive and action-oriented can be an asset, it can actually also be a liability, because if you're moving people too quickly through this process of trying to emerge from this change or discussing what's going on, you start just barking orders and directing people what to do. People start feeling dismissed. They may feel bowled over, rushed along. So here's where, leaders, crisis leaders really need to have curiosity, right? Slow down a bit, conversation-wise. And psychological safety comes from that. If you start ramrodding things with people, they're not going to be very receptive to you, especially if they're not in a place where they're ready to receive that. So you have to be really mindful on the communication side. So crisis leaders in ambiguous times will sound like this. Instead of do this, we're going to tackle this thing, we're going to take this on, or this is how we're going to get it done. It sounds more like, let's talk about it as a team, right? How do we feel about AI? This big scary thing that's out there, and we don't know how it's going to impact our jobs or the way we work. What can we do to learn more about it? And maybe what do you think we should consider? So here you see there's more curiosity. It's not directive. It's more inclusive of getting people's input. And I think it makes a huge difference in how people respond to the leader.
Yeah, there's a lot of charismatic leadership here.
Yeah, there is. But, VUCA is really non-negotiable in our world today. So if you don't know the acronym or what they stand for, sooner or later you will. I think I saw a timeline that showed all the crisis events that have happened in the last 200 years. And it was just it's just overwhelming to look at it because there's so many significant events. And we may not see it like that, but there is so many. That's just one right after the other. So that's our world that we live in. But I think learning to be an effective crisis leader really requires the skills and competencies of vision casting, I think is super critical. Inspiration, influence, communicating for action, transparency in the way we're talking with people or how we allow people to experience us, right? And then curiosity, psychological safety, and inclusion. These are attributes, I think, of crisis leaders that really help crisis leaders be successful.
Well, that was great. Well, I do want to take a moment. We have been talking a lot and haven't had a chance to hear from our special guest yet. Matt, I wanted to come to you. With everything we've talked about, what VUCA do you find the most challenging as a crisis leader, and where do you excel?
It's a good question. Probably ambiguous. The biggest challenge, as you can imagine, it is the unknown. And it is, what level of the unknown. And take Hurricane Ian, for example. There were dynamics with that my computer model showed, and I knew the analytics, and I knew what the models were indicating, but there were parts of the storm that did not go according to plan. So it is that unknown.
Right.
That you do the best that you can, but there are times where Mother Nature just does whatever it wants.
Yeah, you're I'm the weatherman. You're making me look bad.
Yeah, we are just trying to tame her and figure her out. But at the end of the day, Mother Nature, it's whatever she says goes.
Yep, that's right. Thank you for answering that question.
Well, speaking to the VUCA aspect, as far as volatile goes, if I recall during Ian, you guys had to leave studio as well. So you were reporting from different places or from vans as well. So you want to talk about volatile work environment, even through it all, still being able to deliver that information in a calm manner. My goodness.
So in this room, and obviously the listeners can't see it, the room that we are right now broadcasting from had 2 feet of water in it.
Wow.
We had 4 feet of storm surge outside of the building, 2 feet got in through the foundation.
Oh.
And literally the room that you are sitting in right now had 2 feet of storm surge. And even the smell hours and days after
I can
haunts
imagine
my
that, yeah.
dreams. But the storm surge was the biggest dynamic with Ian. 15 feet, historically high, the greatest that we've ever had.
Wow.
And it led to just terrible loss of life and economic damage, and 113 billion at a minimum. 113 billion at a
Right.
minimum. And it was just that devastating storm surge that got a hold of WINK. And there was a time where we had to do what's called a vertical evacuation. And this is a 2-story building. We had to go to the second story
Yeah.
because we didn't know how high the water was going to get.
Yeah.
Oh man, can you think of all your equipment? You're like thinking, trying
Oh,
to,
yeah.
not only do you have to inform the community of everything that's going on, but feeling the threat of all the things that you do to be able to communicate that, being in
That's-
jeopardy. So
That's right. And the reason why we did get knocked off air was the water was so high. And what's amazing is our generator was even lofted. It got to the generator.
wow.
Wow.
And so we were unable to recharge it back up. And then after that, speaking of technology, the water inundated my weather software, my ability to show the hurricane.
Oh.
That got knocked offline as well. So what we were left with at a time during our absolute worst was doing Facebook Lives and using social media, and then using our phone, which still was able to use the local cell phone towers
Right.
to get information in. And I basically looked at my phone to know where the hurricane was, how strong it was, and relay that via social media.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
though.
Wow.
That's called resourcewulness.
That's right.
That we talked about.
Yeah, because you
being
think
agile.
the storm didn't stop when we got knocked off the air, so
Right.
the threat was still there. And I was like, all right, well, if TV is not going to be it, then let's go to social media. And we did Facebook Lives as the water was coming into the building just after landfall.
My
Man,
goodness. Yeah.
that's resourceful.
Yeah.
Really great, like in the moment. But when you think about that with uncertainty, I mean, there you have it, right? You're having to think in the moment, okay, now what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And how are we going to fix that? And you look at complex. Can you speak to like the complexity of things there for you? Like
Oh, yeah.
being a crisis leader, like you got to show up somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's multiple levels to that complexity. First off, the complexity of the hurricane forecast itself, in that Hurricane Ian, Hurricane Ian made landfall on a Wednesday. That Sunday, 3 days before, the center line of the forecast cone was showing the Florida Big Bend. And a lot of people thought that it was going to go up the coast.
Right.
And they did not factor in the complexities of a weather forecast, and that things do change, and they did change. And Ian shifted 250 miles to the east.
Wow.
And the
Lucky.
warning, and I remember giving hypothetical warnings that, hey, this could continue to shift east. You need to prepare for the worst. We hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And then when it actually came in, the complexity of the situation here in the building was storm surge was coming in. We had, I remember we had power lines that were going down outside of the building. I could actually hear the transformers. They were
no.
Oh,
literally
yeah.
blowing.
Blowing those out, yeah.
And, and winds were hitting 100 to 130 outside. So you were hoping and praying that the roof didn't peel off.
Yeah.
As you are still broadcasting at that time, keeping your composure, because that translates to our viewers at home. Even despite that I had water coming in, the wind gusts over 100 to 130 outside. And then as time went on, we got knocked out. And then there were people who, as we went upstairs, we had to all find places to sleep. We needed places to eat and go to the bathroom. And so the way that I am is I want others to be happy before me. So I just found a spot on a hard floor in one of the rooms and where it was quiet. And I slept for about 3 hours until I look up and the Fort Myers Fire Department was right above me. And they basically said that the building is no longer safe to be in and that you need to evacuate.
Oh, no.
And so them, along with the Fort Myers Police Department, I think it was the Fort Myers Police Department, they sent one of their SWAT, almost like armored tank vehicles, to come and get us to go
wow.
through the high water outside.
Wow.
And they were able to get us as we went back home to wherever we were at. Thankfully, I lived across the street at the time, so I was able to get home. But the other reality that we faced is after the storm, we had no power and we had no clean water.
Oh, right.
So with a hurricane, it's not just the before and the during, it is absolutely the after and all of the challenges that you can face.
Yeah, definitely so.
That
Yes.
was an amazing answer.
Yeah, so you talk about that ambiguous, and it goes back to some of the conversations we've been having about the importance of agility for crisis leadership. You know, you just have to be able to make a plan and maybe change the plan and do a different plan because you just never know what's coming your way. You try something, you think it's going to work, and you have to be able to kind of like make assumptions, give it your best shot. If it's not working, tweak it and keep moving forward.
A hurricane very rarely goes absolutely 100% according to plan. And that's why it's good to have a plan A, B, C, D, and E. And, you know, I knew that the building was going to flood, but let's just say some of the other people at WINK didn't. They were using their previous history of hurricanes in this building, and they thought that, hey, we haven't flooded since we've been here since the 1950s, and we won't flood on this one, but they did. And even them, they were having to go into plan B, C, D, and E. And that's the way, especially with a high impact event like this, plan A is not going to cut it. You need to think of hypotheticals, even before the storm. What happens if I lose power? What happens if we run out of water? What happens? You need to think of every possible contingency, because that's the only way you're going to get through it.
Right.
And then you also, like you had said, you need to be quick on your feet. You will have people that are asking you questions. Do I do this? How do I do this? Where do I go? And you just need to very calmly take one piece at a time, answer that question, and then move on.
But if you think about it, like in the aftermath of the hurricane, the news station WINK News was really like a hub for people of where to go, where to get water, what gas stations do I go to, how do I have to get this? That's huge, right?
Well, and you know, we were talking about contingencies and plan A, B, C, and D. I mean, what we did after we got knocked off air is we did not have another studio to go to. So what we did is we went to our transmitter tower, which is right near Babcock Ranch, and no exaggeration, it is in a shed. And we turned that shed into a set. And, you know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And we did the best that we could with what we had. And we actually did get on TV. It may have looked like a elementary school presentation where we had like a stick mic but we did the best that we could. And ironically, people enjoyed it. So, for example, even with me, I lost all my fancy weather graphics. So I said, hey, people still got to get the weather. And it may not look fancy, but let's do it. I took a washboard and a marker. I drew panels to create a 7 and 10 day forecast. I drew icons of the sun, drew in the numbers, and people loved it.
Yeah.
I even had people, they said, we want you to do this more than the actual real graphic one
This is great.
that we spent thousands on. Yeah, they wanted the washboard one. So, you know, that is how you get through these situations. You got to always be constantly on your feet, and you have to think outside the box. And, you know, some things will not work out well, but some things will. And you won't know that they will unless you take a chance
Right.
and you develop a plan.
Well, as a crisis leader yourself, I mean, you're in weather, so weather is always VUCA.
Oh, yeah. Oh, every day. Every day.
Like, do you feel like you kind of thrive in that role? Or?
Yes, no doubt it's stressful, but over the years I've had to learn how to manage that stress, and I also prioritize what has the greatest need.
Right.
So that's also a big thing, is prioritizing not only the subject but also your time. There's only a finite amount of time that you can give per day, and you need to make sure that you're making the best of it, especially in a weather situation, whether it be tropical weather, tornadoes, or, you know, California, earthquakes up north with snow, fires. Oh, yeah. So you do need to be very smart with time management.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Matt. That's
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Thank you guys for sharing. Susan, is there any other final points you wanted to touch on before we go?
Oh, I think I've said enough. And I really do thank the guests for sharing their point of view because, even though you look at it, I think what's most challenging as a crisis leader is going to be different for everybody because we're all human beings, right? So some things we're better at than other things. And I think the key there is just, in some ways we can prepare to be a crisis leader by focusing on these skills. So.
All right. Well, we touched on some great things today, discussing what a VUCA environment is: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Also, key leadership behaviors. Thank you, Susan, and our guests, of course, for sharing insights on the topic. In our next episode, we're going to take a look at readiness for change.
Oh, yeah. I look forward to it. Thank you, Dario.
Until next time.